Lorde officially announces her comeback single. Lana Del Rey has a new single on the way and plenty more pop news to discuss. On today's Pop Pod, I am Pop Sam Cam. Sorry for the spottiness of the podcast this week. I have been traveling back from Coachella. We will be back on schedule next week. I'll have the podcast for you today, and then also tomorrow we'll do the bop and flop, so there's plenty more coming up. If you like what you're hearing, follow or subscribe and rate the podcast 5 stars if you are liking it. Don't forget, you can also find me on TikTok and Instagram, where I do regular updates all the time. Let's get into the headlines today. Lorde has officially announced her new single, What Was That?
I gave you everything, now we wake from a dream. Well, baby, what was that?
She's basically given us the title and the single cover and a promise that the song will be out soon, whatever that means. I don't think Lorde often teases things for long, so expect to get this over the next couple weeks. I mean, my earliest bet would be this Friday, but we'll have to wait and see. A song that is definitely coming this Friday is Lana Del Rey's Bluebird. This is the follow-up to last week's Henry Come On and will serve as the second song to come from her forthcoming album, which was called The Right Person Will Stay. The Right Person Will Stay is no longer called that, according to Lana herself, and will also not be arriving on the release date, so we will just have to wait and see when that comes. She is due to play Stagecoach at the end of the month. Tate McRae is also teasing new music, but it's probably not what many of her fans wanted nor expected. It seems that she's teasing new music with country star Morgan Wallen. Morgan Wallen obviously has a pretty spotty history that I won't go into right now, but he is about to release a new album. Tate put up basically a jersey on her Instagram story that seemed to also tease Morgan Wallen, leading everybody to thinking that there is a collab on the way. I got into that deeper on my TikTok if you want to go and have a look at that. Chappell Roan has appeared on the Lost Culturistas podcast and has talked about her new music, including The Giver and also The Subway, notably about what's changing with them in the studio. A lot of people were upset that the bridge of The Giver was slightly different from the one that she performed on SNL. And now she's told them that The Subway, the song that she's performing live over and over again throughout last year, will also be different. We're not sure in what way, but she's basically said the reason it hasn't come out yet is because she's banging her head against a wall trying to figure out how to kind of match the energy that she has on stage with the studio version of that song. So we will have to wait and see when The Subway arrives.
I've been banging my head against the wall with The Subway because songs can work live. Certain things can work live and they do not work in the studio.
Sure. Right. Let's move over to the charts where the Lady Gaga renaissance is continuing. Judas is the biggest gainer on the global Spotify charts, up 49 places to 131. That's one of 6 songs that are currently appearing on the global charts, including Die With A Smile at number 1, Abracadabra at number 17, Poker Face at 64, Bad Romance at 118, and Just Dance at 128. Every single song has risen apart from Die With A Smile because there is nowhere else to rise. It's already at number 1. This is obviously off the back of her incredible Coachella performance. I reviewed that on the last podcast if you want to hear my thoughts on that set, but it's pretty clear that everybody's had a unanimous reception to this performance, given that they are all going back and rediscovering her back catalogue over this week. I think that's super exciting. She has the second performance coming up this weekend. I'm super interested to see if it's any different to the first one that we got, but this is a very good time for Lady Gaga. It is very much a renaissance for her and her music. Let's get into the main part of the podcast today, where I want to talk about how Lorde has successfully turned her fortunes around in time for her 4th album.
See your silver chain levitate when you're kick flipping.
Lorde's last album, Solar Power, arrived in 2021. It was her 3rd album and probably the least well-received album that she's ever given. Her second album, Melodrama, was an absolute classic. It was nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys. It appeared at the top of many critical lists for that year and is definitely a fan favorite as well. It did give her a top 20 single with Greenlight, but didn't really match the commercial impact of her debut album, Pure Heroine. Solar Power definitely did the worst commercially and critically. It just was not well received. And I've talked about Solar Power, on this podcast before, mostly about how much I like it and how I think it was kind of received in the wrong way as being this sunny, summery record when it really had these undertones of darkness that ran through it. And discovering that kind of reveals the beauty of that album. But regardless of what you thought about it, you cannot deny that it was not received as well as other Lorde projects, and her stocks were kind of down. And I was interested to see what she was going to do, whether she was going to rush out another album to try and erase the memory of Solar Power in some way, or whether she was just going to push through and let her naturally have her time again. And seeing the point that she is at right now, where she's announced this single, What Was That?, it's clear that that was the right thing to do, because there are so many things that have happened over the past couple years that have turned Lorde's luck around and put her in one of the best positions ever to be releasing an album. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Let's talk about Solar Power, when she basically reflects on this album and talks about how she was pretty confused about what the reception was. She wrote an email back in 2023, I think it was, and she said, "It took people a while to get the album. I still get emails every day from people who are just coming around to it now, and that response was really confounding and at times painful to sit with at first." The excitement the Lorde had for Solar Power was palpable. She was really, really into kind of the references that she'd had on it and talked a lot about how she kind of wanted to replicate that S Club 7 feeling with more of a, I don't know, prog rock kind of sound. She also felt that it was the best thing that she'd ever done, and she really hasn't turned her back on that thought. She hasn't said anything ill about the album, but she did say that she learned a ton about herself and how she was perceived by making the album, saying that she feels significantly more connected and alive in her art practice and life pretty much more than ever before. I could see this throughout the process, particularly on the tour. She started the Solar Power tour and the music was very solar power-y. It was basically a replica of what she'd given us on the record. I really liked it. I saw her show at Primavera Sound. I think it would have been back in 2023 and 2022, I saw that show and I was super impressed by it and how she kind of weaved in her old material with her new material as well. But as time went on and that immediate kind of visceral response to disliking the record started to go away, Lorde really stepped into her own and kind of started moving back more towards this pop danceable sound. And you could tell that she was very, very inspired by dancing and moving again the same way that she was on Melodrama. And it kind of all culminates at a show in 2023 where she plays a new song called Silver Moon for the first time. I'll play you a snippet of that.
Every night, the silver moon is changing. Can you say the same? Do you stay the same?
Silver Moon had this kind of awkward, jittery Melodrama sound to it that also had a certain Robin quality to it as well. You could tell that she was really back in her pop bag. She also teased another song called Invisible Ink that had a similar feeling to it.
The bodies move, we'll sing the incantation, fall right into you, choose pleasure over patience.
And by this time, the Solar Power show was starting to get darker and darker aesthetically. In a lighting kind of way, you could tell that she'd made these very purposeful choices to start setting the sun on the Solar Power era and moving her back towards something that wasn't so much dark as sort of neon lit. This feels a little more clubby than what she was doing on that record, and a little bit more, to me, authentic to what Lorde is all about in terms of what I know about her as a musician. And at that time, we also we start seeing pictures of her in the studio with producers like Dev Hynes, also known as Blood Orange, and also Jim E. Stack, who is the producer who I assume has worked on the new single, What Was That?, given that he reposted the announcement. Jimmy Stack's worked with people like Haim and also Bon Iver and Empress of as well, is really good at doing this sort of left center, off-kilter pop sound, a little odder than Jack Antonoff, but not worlds away from Jack Antonoff, if you get what I mean. And then obviously Dev has produced some of the most phenomenal pop records, everything from Sky Ferreira to Solange, really sitting in that left lane of pop that has influenced so much over the past couple years particularly. And it just makes so much sense to me that she's in the studio with them. There's an excitement that you could get from reading her words in her emails, but also just from the pictures that she was really tapped in making this music. It's very rare to get any kind of direct response from Lorde in between albums, but it feels like with this one, she's been more conversational than ever in talking about it without really revealing anything about what the sound or direction will be. I think at one point she did note that it would be a little bit more upbeat and danceable than anything that she's done before. So this already is kind of changing her fortunes, because the fans of Melodrama are starting to see maybe there's going to be something for me on this record. Maybe I can turn back towards being a Lorde fan, even if I wasn't a big fan of Solar Power. And running in parallel to that is this kind of appreciation for Lorde's music and influence in general, alongside a host of other artists who have had a huge influence as well. I guess a lot of us who grew up listening to music by Sky Ferreira, Tinashe, Charlie XCX, these artists who were kind of known as bloggy pop artists, they were all starting to be reappraised. I guess we're of an age now where we can give them the critical understanding and also the love and turn a whole new audience onto them on TikTok as well. And I put Lorde in that kind of bag too. And obviously we've seen over the past year exactly what has happened in that space in terms of Charlie XCX having this massive moment with Brat. And also, I guess, too, Sky Ferreira, as much as it's been hard to sort of pluck new music from her and get some really memorable performances, she has been touring and has been kind of getting her flowers as a cult icon for songs like Everything Is Embarrassing and having a little moment on TikTok as well. And then obviously Tinashe had that moment with Nasty too. And that's just a collection of artists. There are so many others. I think the Lana Del Rey reappraisal that's happened over the last couple years can also be thrown into this bag. But the Brat movement is particularly important for this story because I think that it shows that there is now a place for uncompromising pop stars making slightly odd pop music in the mainstream. I think the problem with Melodrama and the reason why it didn't perhaps do what it should have done commercially is that it was just a little too odd for the sounds that were on the radio at the time. Back in 2017, I think, was when Melodrama was released. It was a real hip hop world at that point, and Melodrama was basically an odd pop record with these really sort of crunchy, almost abrasive at times sounds. And I just don't think the commercial, basically sphere, but radio in particular, was ready for a project like that. It's the reason why Greenlight goes on to be the only hit. And it's interesting because I hear Greenlight now and it confuses me as to why it wasn't a bigger hit. And then I remember that it was a totally different time. And this kind of music feels a lot more at home now in 2025 than it did back in 2017. And I think that that movement that's been happening with pop music turning a little less manufactured and a little bit more authentic, even though I'm starting to hate using that word, I think that it's important in this narrative for Lorde over the past couple years. And then there's the cherry on top of that movement, which is what happens with Girl So Confusing.
It's so confusing sometimes to be a girl.
Charlie XCX writes this song about not only her kind of tortured relationship with Lorde, but her confusing relationship with women in general and how they're pitted up against each other and forced to have these feelings when they're really sort of overthought. And it's an anxious song. It's not a diss track at all. Well, I never read it as a diss track, but it certainly paints out a knotty relationship between Charli XCX and Lorde, mostly fueled by the industry and their similar place within it. Lorde kind of does something that we don't expect. When Charli XCX calls up Lorde, or I think she sent a voice note the day the album was released, saying that, like, look, there's a song on the album about you. Lorde, living in New Zealand, had already heard the album. And she ends up deciding that she wants to have a right of reply to this song and delivers this verse that I think is one of the most spectacular pop verses, certainly in my time.
Well, honestly, I was speechless when I woke up to your voice. Now you told me how you've been feeling. Let's work it out on the remix.
Just this real time spill of all her emotions, not only on Charli, but her place in the industry and how she's been feeling over the last couple of years as well. And it's just this spectacular reminder that Lorde is one of these very rare artists who is able to put her words in such a vulnerable and direct way and respond to situations with this really narrative-driven, subconscious type songwriting, the type that she gave us on Melodrama and was able to put us right into the feeling of being a 19-year-old on that record. She does it again, and instead this time is able to put us right in the world of being in your mid to late 20s. I think that Lorde's in her mid to late 20s now. It really is a spectacular moment for her, and it kind of re-energizes everybody about the Lorde experience, reminds us how incredible she is. Supercut starts to go viral on TikTok as well. It just feels like Lorde stocks immediately go up, and it also very perfectly positions her alongside Charli as one of these artists who has done so much work that hasn't always gotten its commercial appraisal, and now is the time to come and grab their flowers. And I feel like there was a very intentional passing of the torch at Coachella over the weekend when Charli brought out Lorde to do Girl So Confusing together for the second time live. And at the end of it, she said Lorde Summer 2025, obviously kind of referencing Brat Summer 2024, but passing the torch on to Lorde.
Make some fucking noise for Lorde. Lorde Summer 2025.
And I feel like this is a very nice moment because it's an acknowledgement of the fact that Lorde is now coming to grab her flowers and have the similar moment that Charli had last year. And I really think that she can have it. The excitement around this single is huge. I've seen that the TikTok has well over 10 million views now. It may even be over 30 million views. I'll have to double check that. But it's clear that there's lots of excitement around this project. And I just feel like it's a position that we couldn't have imagined her being in back in 2021 when we saw the reception to Solar Power. I mean, many people thought that it could kind of be career suicide for her. And yet, bit by bit, over the last couple of years, it's just been building and building and building to arrive at the perfect moment for Lorde to drop a new album. And I honestly don't think that it could have been done better these last couple of years. If she'd pulled the trigger early, and released an album in, say, 2023, 2 years after Solar Power, we weren't ready for it just then. There was a lot of things to happen to get to the point where Tinashe and Charli were getting their flowers. We're finally at that point now, and Lorde is ready to fire out an album. And if the album is as good as what the snippet is, the tiny snippet of what was that is, then we are going to be in very safe hands with this record over the summer. I'm so excited to hear it. I'm wondering if your opinions on Lorde over the last couple years have changed, or what you feel like this album is going to sound like. If you have a really good idea of that, send me a DM with a voice note, or you can email one to popsamcam@theinterns.net, and I will play it on this very podcast, respond to it as well. That is all I've got for you today. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, hit follow or subscribe and rate this podcast 5 stars. Otherwise, I will see you tomorrow for Bop or Flop. Thank you for listening.